Okay, thank you, Table Topics, no, I'm sorry, Toastmaster, honored guests, and fellow Tech Masters. My name is William Austin, and today I will be giving my icebreaker speech. So, I grew up in Brainerd, Minnesota. This is a picture of my home that I caught off of the Google streetcar cam. I was very surprised that they got it, and this structure actually still stands. You may have noticed that I am half Japanese. This is a picture of my mom and my dad, me when I was about 3 years old. And when I was growing up in grade school, I used to get into a lot of trouble. And I'm not really sure why that was, but there was one kid in particular that I used to get into fights with. And we were good friends, but this kid would just go off at the drop of a hat. We would get into a fight. I'd be in the lunchroom, and I would say, "Hey, what do you have for lunch today?" And he always had tuna fish sandwiches and Mickey's banana flips, and he would never share his banana flip. But he would look over and he'd say, "Well, I got tuna. What do you got?" And I'd say, "Well, I got bologna." And this guy would be on me. And we'd be wrestling in the lunchroom, and the teacher would break us apart, and I'd get hauled into the principal's office. And the principal knew my mother very well. And they would always tell me the same thing. "Why are you getting into these fights? You know it's not good to fight. Please stop fighting." And I would always say, "It's not me. I don't know what's going on." A little bit later, I figured out that this kid's last name was McLaughlin, which made him Irish. Now, I'm not saying there's any stereotypes around the Irish, but maybe little Billy wasn't starting as many fights as he was accused of. So that brings me to how I got started in this field. I'm a .NET consultant right now, and I was thinking back, where did I actually get started? Where did the spark start? And it was because of this. I was part of the computer revolution when they used to put the word personal in front of computer. You call it a personal computer. And the one line you could always use with your parents to help you get things was, "It will help me with my schoolwork." So I found this amusing little video on YouTube. I've gone back and watched it many times. These are the first computers that I had. The one on the right is a Commodore VIC-20. The one on the left is an Apple. I had an Apple IIe. I believe that was just an Apple II. But this was my first computer, the Commodore. It had no disk drive, no tape drive. Back in those days, if you wanted to play a game, and let's face it, that's why we all had computers in our family, you either had to buy a $25 cartridge to plug into the side, or you could type these in the back of a magazine. So me and my friends, or anybody I could get to sit with me long enough, would go buy these magazines for about $2 a piece, and we'd key in all this basic source code for these games, because you get new games every month. We didn't know how to touch type, and we weren't real accurate, and we'd always have problems once we got one of these things typed in. So then, once you got past 3 days of typing it in, there was another 3 to 4 days of debugging it and getting it to work. And then, to make it even worse, every once in a while, we'd find actual problems in the code. Not that we typed it in wrong, but they printed it wrong. So then you had to figure out those logic errors. But this is where I got hooked. Even through all that pain, I just got hooked on computers. That you could put things into a computer and make it do what you wanted it to do. So this brings me to my professional career. As I stated, I'm a .NET consultant now. And let me go to the next slide. So my first job out of college, I made a decision that still haunts me to this day. I was working for a company that does loan software. And there was a problem or requirement that I was given where each state in our whole United States did this particular loan rule a little bit differently. Minnesota did it one way, Iowa did it another way, Hawaii did it yet another way. So being fresh out of the college and still wet behind the ears, I thought, hey, this is a great use for inheritance. So I coded up roughly 40-some classes that each handled this little rule in lending a little bit differently. And I increased the size of the project immensely. The people that did the build at this particular company came back to me and said, what are you doing? I explained it, they bought it. So I'm still horrified by what I did. This is a pretty good example of what I did. I added that much complexity to the project, just like that. And another thing I noticed while I was working for this company is there was people that were smart but couldn't communicate. So they would go into a meeting and they would try to get some point across, and for whatever reason, people just weren't getting it. Maybe they didn't care to talk down to their level. Maybe they didn't care if the other person actually got the message. Do you guys recognize this person from the Saturday Night Live skits? The computer guy at your company? I've met people like this. He it's actually both things that I observed. So one was people that couldn't communicate. The other one was that people who were very smart but didn't cooperate. They don't play well with others. And I noticed this, and I decided that I didn't want to be like that. I wanted to see if I could, improve myself. You don't want to be this guy. So I started consulting because I knew that that would get me into more relationships with people and get me out of my comfort zone. So I started consulting. And what they didn't tell me when I started consulting was every new gig that you have is like being the new kid in the lunchroom. You go into a new gig, you don't know anybody. And people kind of look at you funny. And this was difficult for me. I talked it over at length with my wife. And what it came down to is you have to get in there. You have to, I think I saw a speech by you called Come to the Mat. You have to get in there and make yourself vulnerable. So I started doing some research, and I came up with these two books. And you can look at these books and you can tell that they're not new. This guy actually talks about punch cards, but the lessons that you learn in that book translate over. And I applied what I learned out of these two books to make myself a better consultant. So, starting from a kid born in Brainerd who's half Asian, who got into a lot of fights that he may or may not have started, who then got a computer bought by his parents, who got into programming, basic source code out of the back of magazines, to making a really bad mistake fresh out of college, to consulting and learning that at a point in your career it becomes less about code and more about relationships with people and what other people think of you. Brings me to here today at TechMasters in front of all of you. This is something that I want to get more involved in. This is public speaking, and I believe TechMasters is a great way to do that. So, thank you very much.